I had just turned 62 when the stroke hit. I don't remember falling. One moment I was cleaning out the gutters, the next I was lying on the ground, face to the sky, my right arm stiff and useless. The paramedics came. Then the hospital. Then home. My wife Lillian said she'd take care of me. Said she'd never leave my side. For 38 years, she was my partner in everything. We built this house together. Raised a boy we adopted at 12. Jason. But now it was just me and Lillian again. Or so I thought. The first 2 weeks at home were quiet. Too quiet. She fed me soup, gave me meds, but something in her eyes had changed. She wasn't looking at me the way she used to. There was no warmth. No patience. She'd rush through everything like she couldn't stand being near me. At night, she'd sleep in the other room. Claimed she couldn't rest with me wheezing beside her. I didn't argue. My body was too weak to move, and I was grateful for anything she did. But on the 12th night, I heard something. It was faint. A low, rhythmic sound. Breathing. Moaning. Soft and hushed, but unmistakable. I lay still, ears focused. It came from the guest room. Her room now. I thought I imagined it. Maybe the TV. Maybe she was talking in her sleep. The next night, it came again. This time, clearer. A giggle. Then a whisper, he's barely alive. What are we waiting for? I froze. That voice was a man's. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out everything else. I couldn't turn my head. Couldn't sit up. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of betrayal. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I asked her if someone had visited. She smiled like she used to and said, "No, honey. Just you and me." That was when I knew. Knew deep in my bones that I was no longer her husband. I was a burden. A body waiting to die. I had a security system installed before the stroke, one of those discreet models with hidden cameras. The main console was in the basement, out of her sight. Took me half an hour to drag myself down there in my wheelchair, holding the rail like a lifeline. I reviewed the footage from the past week. And there he was. Jason. Our adopted son. Walking into her room at midnight. Shirtless. Comfortable. Smiling. She kissed him. On the mouth. Long, slow. Like a lover. My blood ran cold. I rewound, rewatched, praying I was wrong. She was in lingerie. He undressed her like he'd done it 1,000 times. I couldn't look away. I couldn't breathe. I stopped the footage and stared at the black screen. My son. My wife. In my house. I knew right then this wasn't just an affair. This was something deeper. Older. A plan. The next night, I pretended to sleep. I heard the door creak. Light steps. A whisper, he's drugged. Don't worry. Something cold touched my arm. I felt the sting of a needle. Then darkness. I woke up to metal. Cold. Hard. My body wrapped in a shroud. I was in a drawer. A morgue drawer. I screamed until my throat bled. Someone opened it. A janitor maybe. He ran. Next thing I knew, I was outside in a hospital gown, barefoot, in the freezing air. I walked. Limped. Crawled. Somehow, I made it home. The house was full of cars. People. Funeral flowers lined the porch. Inside, I saw my own picture above the fireplace. A casket in the center of the living room. I watched as Jason held my wife's hand. She wept. He kissed her. And I understood. I wasn't supposed to survive. They tried to bury me alive. And now they were celebrating. But I was home. And they had no idea. I stood outside my own house, watching the people who once called me family grieve over a man they thought was dead. Some were neighbors, some were old friends from the firehouse. I saw the pastor from our local church, the one who had given our son his confirmation. I even saw my old fishing buddy, Hank, who used to drink beer with me every Sunday by the lake. And in the center of it all, holding back tears with a dramatic poise that made me nauseous, was Lillian. My wife. Dressed in black, veil and all. She was giving a speech. I couldn't hear the words, but the way she paused, the way she choked and dabbed at the corner of her eye with a tissue, it was all for show. Beside her stood Jason. Not in the back, not like a son giving quiet support to his grieving mother. No. He was up front. Side by side with her. Hand in hand. Smiling just a little too much for someone who just lost a father. I backed away, staying in the shadows. If anyone had seen me, pale, half-dressed, barely walking, they might have thought I was a ghost. And maybe in that moment, I was. I waited until the house emptied. They went out to the cemetery to bury the empty coffin. I didn't follow. Instead, I limped around the back of the property, climbed over the fence like a criminal, and slipped into the basement through the side door. Everything smelled the same. That was the worst part. The familiar scent of home, of cedar, and coffee and Lillian's laundry detergent. It made my stomach turn. I needed proof. Evidence. Anything I could use to show the world what really happened. The security system had caught the affair. But that wasn't enough. People cheat. People make mistakes. I needed something bigger. Something that couldn't be explained away as a fling or bad judgment. I started in the office. Lillian always kept her financial stuff separate. Said it made taxes easier. I never cared. I trusted her. Foolish. I found her laptop. Locked. But Jason had taught me enough about tech to know how to guess her password. It was his birthday. Of course. The desktop was neat. Almost too neat. One folder, labeled receipts, was filled with bank transfers, thousands of dollars moving between her account and someone named H. Walton. I recognized that name. A coroner. She paid him to falsify a death certificate. I kept digging. Emails. Plans. She'd sent photos of my medical records, notes about my decline, even a message that read, "Once the paperwork clears, we're free." But it was the video file that made me stop breathing. I clicked. Lillian was on camera. Sitting at our kitchen table. Jason behind her, shirtless. She looked into the lens and said, "To everyone who's donated to the GoFundMe, thank you. Roy was the love of my life. Losing him has left me broken. But I will honor his memory by continuing to live." Jason leaned in and kissed her neck. The video ended. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I copied everything. Flash drive, email backups, even printed some of it. I packed it all in a folder and hid it behind the furnace. If I disappeared again, someone had to find it. I didn't leave the house. I couldn't. I needed to see them. Hear it from their mouths. I needed to know how deep it went. That night, they came home. Laughing. I listened from the vent above the living room. Jason popped a bottle of champagne. They toasted. To new beginnings, Lillian said. To freedom, Jason added. I clenched my fists until my nails dug into my palms. Then she said something I'll never forget. "I wish we'd done it sooner." He was already useless. Just lying there, drooling. Jason chuckled. "I told you. You deserved better." They moved to the couch. She curled into him. They kissed. Not like mother and son. Not like anything that could be forgiven. And then she whispered, "We'll get married in the fall. No one will question it. I'm the grieving widow. You're the devoted son." My legs gave out. I collapsed onto the floor of the basement and didn't move for hours. Later, I stared at the mirror and said the words out loud. They tried to bury me. I looked at my hands. Old, scarred, but not dead. I'm still here. And now, it was my turn to plan. The next morning, I left before sunrise. They were still asleep upstairs, wrapped in each other like nothing was wrong, like they hadn't just tried to erase a man's life. I didn't have a plan yet. Just a fire in my chest and a folder of evidence. I walked for hours, half hidden under a hoodie and cheap sunglasses I found in the garage. I couldn't risk being recognized. Not yet. I ended up at an old friend's house. Davis. We served together on the force before I retired. He'd lost a leg in a warehouse fire, never married, but the guy still had the sharpest instincts I knew. When he opened the door, he nearly dropped his coffee. "Jesus, Roy. You look like hell." I walked in without a word and dropped the folder on his table. He flipped through the pages. The fake death certificate. The emails. The photos. The bank transfers. The video. I watched his face harden, one page at a time. "How long?" he asked. 3 weeks since they buried me. Maybe longer since it started. He didn't say anything right away. Just poured me a cup of coffee and sat down. "What do you want to do?" "I want justice." He nodded slowly. "You want justice, or revenge?" I didn't answer. He leaned forward. "Roy, listen to me. If you go to the cops right now, they'll investigate. Maybe. But Lillian's smart. She'll spin it. Say you faked your own death. Say you lost your mind. Hell, she already has a death certificate with your name on it. You go public too early, they'll turn it around on you. I need to hit her where it hurts. Then we do it right. We do it legal, but brutal." We spent the rest of the day building a plan. First, I needed to establish that I was alive, officially. That meant medical proof. Davis called in a favor from a doctor who owed him, and by evening I had blood work, fingerprints, and a video testimony with today's date. All signed, sealed, and notarized. Next came the financials. We tracked every account Lillian had access to, every suspicious wire transfer, every charity donation she collected after announcing my death. Over $40,000 had poured in from friends, neighbors, even strangers online. All gone. We printed it all. Then came the hard part. Davis reached out to a local talk show. Not the national ones. Not yet. Too risky. We needed something local. Controlled. A place where I could tell my story, live, without the chance for her to twist it. They booked me for the next week. The producer almost cried when she saw the footage. "You saying you were buried alive?" "I'm saying I was put in a morgue drawer and left there while my wife was sleeping with our son." She turned white. "We'll run it. But you better be ready. Once this hits the air, there's no turning back." I nodded. I don't want to turn back. The night before the broadcast, I went back to my house. I had to see it one last time before it all burned down, metaphorically or otherwise. They weren't home. Probably out celebrating. I let myself in with my own damn key. The place looked different. Her photos had changed. My face was gone. Jason's was everywhere. On the mantel. In the hallway. Even one in the bedroom, shirtless, smiling. She was rewriting history before I was even cold. I went into my old study. It had been turned into a dressing room. Her clothes were everywhere. New. Expensive. Labels I couldn't pronounce. She was already living like a widow with a rich fiancé. On the desk, I found a single envelope. Addressed to The Real Roy. I opened it. Inside was a photo. Lillian, sitting at the dining table, smiling. Jason behind her, one hand on her shoulder, the other resting on the table next to a bottle of wine. My bottle of wine. And a single note written in Lillian's handwriting. You always said I'd be nothing without you. Now I have everything. Rest easy, darling. You were never meant to survive. I put the letter in my pocket. It didn't hurt like I thought it would. I wasn't sad. I was focused. The next morning, I stood under the lights of the studio, microphone clipped to my collar, staring into the camera. The host smiled politely and said, "Whenever you're ready." I leaned in, looked straight into the lens, and said, "My name is Roy Delaney. My wife tried to bury me alive. But I'm still here. And this is the truth." The studio went dead silent after I spoke. You could have heard a fly land on the camera lens. The host blinked twice, like she was waiting for a punchline. There was none. The audience, small but real, looked stunned. Some covered their mouths. One woman whispered, "Oh my God," like I had just crawled out of my own grave, which, in a way, I had. The host cleared her throat and leaned in. "Mr. Delaney, are you saying your wife declared you dead while you were still alive?" "Yes." "And she held a funeral for you?" "Yes." "And you believe she was romantically involved with your adopted son?" "I don't believe it," I said. "I know it." That was when I handed her the folder. The one with everything. The death certificate. The fake will. The emails. The video footage. The show's producers had already seen some of it, but I wanted the audience to feel what I felt, to see the lie. The host flipped through the pages on air, her face tightening with each document. She didn't say anything for a moment, and then she held up a photo for the camera, the one with Jason and Lillian kissing beside my casket. The audience gasped. They were planning to marry, I added, staring straight at the lens. She called it fate. She called it freedom. But it was a trap. And I was the body they buried to get there. The rest of the segment went fast. Questions. Tears. Shouts from the crowd. At the end, the host asked, "What do you want, Roy?" I didn't hesitate. I want the world to know the truth. I want her to lose everything she stole. And I want her to watch as it all crumbles. The show went viral before I even made it out of the building. By the time I stepped onto the street, my phone, a Bernard Davis gave me, was lighting up with messages. Reporters. Strangers. Even people from my hometown I hadn't heard from in years. Some believed me. Some didn't. But it didn't matter. The flood had started. That evening, I watched the broadcast from Davis's house. He sat next to me, silent, arms crossed. When it ended, he nodded. "That'll do it." It didn't take long. The next day, the police knocked on Lillian's door. She opened it with a smile, probably thinking it was more flowers, more sympathy. Instead, she got handcuffs. The news ran wild with the story, "A man declared dead appears on live TV. Wife and adopted son caught in shocking plot. Death, lies, and betrayal in the Roy Delaney case. I didn't go public again. I didn't need to. My face was everywhere now. So was hers. But I wasn't done. A week later, I got a call from a lawyer. Not mine. Jason's. He was trying to claim the house. Said I had forfeited ownership when I died. He didn't know I'd already signed paperwork restoring my legal status. That funeral meant nothing in court. I was alive. And legally, I still owned every inch of that house. So I went back. It was just me and the front door. I didn't knock. I used my key. Inside, it was a mess. Clothes thrown everywhere, food left out. Jason had been living like a king, or a parasite, while I was gone. I found him in the living room, drinking straight from a bottle. He turned when he saw me. His face went white. "No," he said. "You supposed to be dead?" I said, stepping forward. "I know." He stood up. "You can't be here. This is my house now." "No," I said. "This is still mine. And I'm taking it back." He laughed. A pathetic, broken sound. "You think this makes you some kind of hero? You were nothing before. You were old. Weak. That's why she left you." I stared at him for a long second. Then I pulled the flash drive from my pocket. "This has every transaction. Every message. Every lie. I've already given copies to 3 lawyers, 2 journalists, and the police. You want to fight me? Go ahead." Jason sat down, suddenly very small. "She loved me," he mumbled. "No," I said. "She used you. Just like she used me. And when she's done rotting in prison, she'll forget your name." I turned and walked out, leaving him there. I didn't burn the house. I didn't scream or curse or break anything. I just closed the door. And finally, after everything, I felt clean. But I knew it wasn't over. Because there was one detail I hadn't shared with anyone. One last secret. And it was about to surface. There was one secret I hadn't told anyone. Not Davis. Not the lawyers. Not the producers who begged me for exclusive rights. It was the kind of truth that didn't belong on television. It was private. Twisted. And as much as I hated everything Lillian had done to me, what I had discovered about her past chilled me to my core. It started the night after I confronted Jason. I couldn't sleep. My mind wouldn't let me. I sat in the dark at Davis's kitchen table, nursing a glass of whiskey, watching the streetlights flicker through the window blinds. I kept thinking about the way Lillian looked at Jason. The way she touched him. It wasn't just wrong. It wasn't just betrayal. It was something older. Deeper. So I went back to the storage box she kept in the attic. The one marked adoption records. I broke into her old account on our shared laptop and found a password-protected file hidden inside a folder called Taxes 2003. Took me an hour to crack it. When I opened it, I sat frozen for a full 5 minutes. Inside was a letter. It was from a private clinic in Arizona. Dated over 30 years ago. Congratulations on the successful delivery. Patient Lillian Delaney has given birth to a healthy baby boy. Not an adoption. Not a rescued child from foster care. A son. Her son. Jason wasn't adopted. He wasn't taken in from a broken home. He was hers. She lied to me from the beginning. I scrolled down further. Attached were records, ultrasounds, medical bills, signed forms with Lillian's maiden name. No father listed. Just her. The whole story had been a lie. She hadn't adopted Jason at 12. She'd sent him away at birth. Put him in the system. And when we were adopting, she made sure to get him back. Quietly. Legally. Through channels only she controlled. I stood there holding that truth like a live grenade. She brought her own son into our home, lied about who he was, raised him under my roof, and then married him. My stomach turned. I wanted to throw something. Scream. But nothing came out. Instead, I made a choice. The next morning, I visited the jail. Lillian was waiting for her hearing, locked up in the county facility, still in her funeral black dress. Her eyes were tired, her face pale, but she still had that cold smirk. When she saw me, she tilted her head like she was admiring a painting. "Come to gloat?" she asked. I sat down on the other side of the glass. "No. I came to ask you one question." She leaned in, amused. "Go on." "Why?" She blinked slowly, as if pretending to be surprised. "Why what, darling?" I didn't blink. Didn't flinch. "You had me. You had a house. A marriage. Why go through all this?" She stared at me for a while, then leaned back. "You really want the truth? I wouldn't be here otherwise." She smiled. I was bored. The words hit me like a slap. "I spent decades cooking your dinners, washing your clothes, smiling for your friends. I gave up everything when I married you. I wanted excitement. Control. And Jason. Jason was mine. Always was. You raised him," I said. "You called him your son." She shrugged. "So what? Blood is blood. I created him. I shaped him. And when you started to rot, he made me feel alive again." I pressed my palms to the glass. "You planned all this. From the beginning." She didn't deny it. "Not from the beginning. But it came together nicely, didn't it? You tried to bury me. And it almost worked." There was no remorse in her voice. None. Just calm calculation. "You disgust me," I said. She leaned forward again, just enough to let me see the fire still burning in her eyes. "I gave you a life. Then I took it back. You should be grateful I didn't finish the job." I stood up. "You're never getting out of here." She smiled. "We'll see." I walked away. I didn't look back. But I could feel her eyes on me the entire time. That night, I called Davis. "I need everything you can find on that clinic. Every doctor, every nurse, every file. I want a complete record. I need to know who else was involved." He didn't ask why. He just said, "Got it." Because now, it wasn't just about revenge. It was about making sure she never hurt anyone else. Because if Lillian had planned this once, she could do it again. And I had the feeling. Jason wasn't her only secret. 2 days later, Davis called me at 6 in the morning. "Get dressed," he said. "We've got something." I met him at a small cafe outside of town. He already had the file spread across the table, papers curling at the edges, his laptop open to a grainy scan document. "This clinic your wife went to back in '91, he said. "It doesn't exist anymore. Burned down in a fire in '99. Records were transferred to a storage facility in Phoenix. Most of it's incomplete. But I found this." He slid a form across the table. It was an intake document. Handwritten. A little smudged with age. Lillian Delaney. No emergency contact. No insurance. Admitted under a pseudonym, Claire Wyatt. The part that mattered was at the bottom. Multiple pregnancy confirmed. Twins. I stared at that word like it had fangs. Twins? Davis nodded slowly. There was another child, Roy. Where is he? Davis leaned back. That's the thing. Only one baby was registered after birth. Jason. The second child? No name, no release. No adoption paperwork, no death certificate. Nothing. I felt like the floor dropped under my feet. Another one. Another life I didn't know existed. A shadow out there somewhere. A second boy raised in silence. Or hidden. Or worse. What if she kept him hidden? I said. What if he doesn't even know who he is? What if she's not finished? Davis stared at me hard. That's what I'm worried about. We spent the rest of the day combing through missing person databases, hospital records, any lead that mentioned Lillian or her alias. Nothing came up. It was like the second child had vanished at birth. That night, I sat alone, thinking about every moment I spent raising Jason. Every lie she told. Every time she said, "He's our gift." Now I knew the truth. He wasn't our gift. He was her weapon. But what if there was another? Another blade she'd been keeping in the dark? The next day, I got a call from a blocked number. I almost let it ring out. But something in my gut told me to answer. A voice came through. Male. Young. Unsure. Is this Roy Delaney? Yes, I said slowly. There was a pause. You don't know me, he said. But I think I might be your son. I froze. What's your name? I asked. Lucas. Lucas Wyatt. I found a photo in my mother's things. She died last year. Said I was adopted. But there's this letter. It says Lillian Delaney is my birth mother. And that she had a twin pregnancy. I could barely breathe. Where are you? Flagstaff, he said. Arizona. I just want to know the truth. I hung up and stared at the phone like it had caught fire. She lied again. Not just to me, not just to Jason, but to another boy. She'd abandoned him completely. No contact. No explanation. No closure. One child she raised, the other she erased. And now, the forgotten one had come looking. Davis booked a flight that same night. 3 hours later, we were on a plane to Arizona. Lucas met us at a diner off Route 66. He was tall. Same eyes as me. Same jawline. The resemblance was undeniable. He had a folder of documents. Letters. Photos. A grainy picture of Lillian in her 20s, standing next to a nurse, cradling a baby. 2 cribs in the background. I read the letter she'd left behind. It was short. Cold. Almost clinical. If you're reading this, it means you've found out. You were born on the same day as your brother. I chose him. Not you. There's nothing more to say. No love. No regret. Just dismissal. I looked at Lucas. I'm sorry, I said. She should have told you. She should have told us both. He shook his head. I don't care about her. I want to know you. I nodded. But I knew this wasn't the end. This was a new door opening. A new thread unraveling. Because if Lillian had hidden one child, what else had she hidden? What else was buried beneath those 30 years of silence? We flew back the next day, Lucas with us. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Not the press. Not the lawyers. This wasn't a headline. This was personal. But I knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. Because Lillian was scheduled for her first court appearance in 2 days. And I was going to be there. With Lucas by my side. With Jason watching from the back. And the world finally seeing the full weight of the truth she tried to bury. Because she hadn't just buried me. She had buried her past. And now, it was coming back for her. The courthouse was smaller than I expected. Just a plain brick building with peeling paint and too few parking spaces. Nothing about it suggested that inside, someone's life was about to implode. But maybe that's how justice works, quiet, unremarkable, until it hits like a sledgehammer. Lucas stood beside me, dressed in a borrowed suit that didn't quite fit. He looked nervous but determined. Jason was already inside. We'd passed him on the way in. He avoided my eyes, kept his head low, and sat alone near the back of the courtroom like a kid waiting to be scolded. He looked hollow. Lillian was brought in through the side entrance, hands cuffed in front of her, orange jumpsuit crisp and ironed. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Lucas. But when she walked past Jason, she gave him the smallest nod, like a silent message only the two of them could understand. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Then we began. The prosecutor laid it all out with brutal clarity. Fraud. Falsifying death records. Theft by deception. Sexual misconduct. Attempted murder. The courtroom was quiet except for the sound of paper shuffling and the occasional cough. The audience wasn't large, but every person in that room was hanging on every word. Then it was my turn to speak. The judge called me to the stand, and I walked up slowly, feeling every step. I looked out at the faces watching me, reporters, neighbors, strangers with morbid curiosity. Then I looked at Jason. He wouldn't meet my gaze. And finally, I looked at Lucas. His eyes were locked on me. Steady. Proud. I told my story from the beginning. The stroke. The sounds in the night. The betrayal. The morgue. The fake funeral. I held nothing back. The air in the room grew heavier with every sentence. When I got to the part about Jason and Lillian, a woman in the audience gasped and covered her mouth. But I wasn't finished. I turned to the judge and said, "Your Honor, there's one more thing. Something no one else has heard yet." Lillian raised her head, finally meeting my eyes. I recently discovered that Lillian didn't just deceive me about Jason. She also concealed the existence of a second son. A twin. The courtroom murmured. Reporters began scribbling furiously. His name is Lucas. He's here today. The judge looked over at him. Lucas stood up, slowly, respectfully. The judge nodded and motioned for him to sit. She gave him up. Erased him from her life. Hid his identity for over 30 years. And never once tried to make contact. Because he didn't fit her plan. Because he was inconvenient. Lillian's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. I looked at her directly. You tried to erase both of us. Me, because I saw the truth. Him, because you couldn't control him. But now we are both here. And we remember everything. The judge dismissed me. As I walked back to my seat, I passed Lillian. She didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Jason finally looked up. For the first time in weeks, our eyes met. He looked wrecked. Ashamed. But not innocent. The defense attorney stood and began a soft, calculated rebuttal. Claimed Lillian had suffered emotional trauma. That her actions were clouded by grief and stress. That she had made poor decisions, but was not a monster. I almost laughed. But then Lillian stood. Against her lawyer's advice, she asked to speak. The courtroom fell still again. She looked at the judge, hands folded calmly in front of her. "I won't pretend I didn't do what I did," she said. "But I have my reasons." She turned to face me. "I gave you everything, Roy. I gave you a family. A son. A home. I buried my past so you wouldn't have to carry it. And this is how you repay me?" Then she looked at Lucas. "You were never supposed to find out. You were the mistake. The one I let go." Lucas didn't move. He just stared at her with the quiet, burning contempt of a man who had lived his entire life in the shadow of a lie. "You want to make me the villain," she said, louder now. "Fine. But don't forget, I'm the one who made you all." The judge called for order. The gavel struck 3 times. Sentencing would be scheduled for next month. Lillian was escorted out. Jason followed, not in cuffs, but not exactly free. Lucas and I sat in silence for a long moment. Then he said, "That wasn't a mother. That was a storm pretending to be a shelter." I nodded. "She fooled us all." Outside, the sun was shining like it had no idea what had just happened inside that building. But I knew. We weren't just survivors. We were the aftermath. The media frenzy didn't die down. If anything, it got worse. After the trial, cameras followed us everywhere. My name was trending online. Talk shows were debating whether Lillian was mentally unstable or purely evil. I didn't engage with any of it. I didn't give interviews. I didn't respond to messages. I just wanted peace. But peace wasn't coming. Lucas stayed with me for a while. We didn't talk much at first. He was still processing everything, being lied to, being abandoned, finding a brother he never knew and a father who didn't know he existed. We sat in the same room, day after day, like 2 ghosts trying to remember what it felt like to be real. One evening, about a week after the hearing, Lucas came into the kitchen holding a manila envelope. He looked nervous. "I got this in the mail," he said. "No return address." He slid it across the table. Inside were 2 photographs. One of me. One of Lucas. Both taken from a distance. Blurry but unmistakable. One shot was outside my house. The other, outside the courthouse. Attached was a small note. "You not finished yet." I stared at it, blood going cold. "Who would send this?" he asked. I had one name in mind. Only one person would be that bold, that cryptic, and that dangerous. Jason. But why? What could he possibly want now? He'd vanished after the trial. Didn't testify. Didn't speak to reporters. Last we heard, he'd moved out of town. Sold Lillian's house and disappeared. Lucas sat across from me, his jaw clenched. "I think he's watching us." "Why?" I asked. "What does he gain from it?" Lucas hesitated. "There's something I didn't tell you." He looked ashamed, as if the words physically hurt. "I spoke to him. After the trial. Just once." I stood up. "Why the hell would you do that?" I needed answers. I needed to hear from him. He said she manipulated both of us. That she raised him to worship her. That by the time he realized what was happening, it was too late. I sat down slowly, trying to keep calm. "And you believed him?" "I don't know what I believe." But he wasn't angry. He sounded scared. Said there were things I didn't understand. That none of this was over. I rubbed my face, exhausted. He's lying. He's just like her. Maybe. But maybe not. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those photographs. Felt the invisible eyes watching us from somewhere in the dark. The next morning, the second letter arrived. Typed. No return address. It was a list of names. Doctors. Nurses. Former staff from the clinic where Lillian gave birth. At the bottom of the page, in bold letters, ask them what happened to the third child. I stared at the page like it was on fire. Third? I ran through everything in my head. The records said twins. 2 babies. Jason and Lucas. That was already enough horror. But this changed everything. I called Davis. He met me at the house within the hour. Who gave you this? He asked. No name. Just a letter. He scanned the list. Some of these people are dead. Retired. One of them runs a private facility in Utah. I handed him the second photo. Somebody's watching us. Jason? I think so. Or someone working for him. Davis made some calls, pulled a few strings, and within 2 days we were flying to Utah. The facility wasn't much to look at, small, clean, private. The kind of place people went when they didn't want to be found. We met with Dr. Sheila Mercer, one of the names on the list. At first, she was hesitant to talk. But once we showed her the letter, she went pale. I remember Lillian, she said. She was intense. Controlling. Refused to let us call anyone. Paid in cash. And the babies? I asked. She gave birth to triplets, Dr. Mercer said quietly. 3 boys. The room spun. Triplets. What happened to the third? Dr. Mercer looked away. She said she'd made arrangements. A private adoption. The child was taken before we could even document him. No records? Davis asked. She made us destroy them. I leaned forward. Can you remember anything? Any detail? She wore gloves the whole time, Mercer said. And the man who came to take the baby, he wasn't a social worker. He had no ID. He just said, I'm here for the third. That's all. Lucas sat frozen beside me. I thought I was the secret, he whispered. We both were, I said. And now, there's one more. We flew back in silence. I didn't speak for hours. Because I knew what was coming. One son betrayed me. Another was lost and found. But now there was a third. And I had no idea what side he was on. 3 sons. That was the phrase I kept repeating in my head. Like a chant. Like a curse. 3 sons, and I had only ever known one of them, Jason. And now that I did know the second, Lucas, I was left standing at the edge of another mystery, one far darker than I ever expected. A third boy, born the same day, erased before his first breath had a name. Lucas paced in the living room, his hands trembling. If she gave him away like she gave me away, then why is someone sending us letters now? Why stir this up? I didn't have an answer. Davis did. She didn't give him away, he said. She placed him. There's a difference. She hid Lucas to forget. But the third? She put him somewhere with a purpose. What kind of purpose? I asked. Insurance, Davis said. Leverage. Lillian was a planner. Always 2 steps ahead. What if she wanted a backup in case Jason failed her? That hit hard. It sounded exactly like her. The next morning, another envelope arrived. No postage. No handwriting. Just dropped at my front door while we slept. Inside was a single USB drive. No note. No label. We plugged it into Davis's laptop. A video file opened. The footage was grainy, black and white, like security cam footage from an old facility. A small room. White walls. A cot. A boy, maybe 16, sitting on the edge of the bed, rocking slowly. He looked familiar. The shape of his jaw. The tilt of his eyes. The way he rubbed his hands together in perfect rhythm. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew. I was looking at my son. A third version of myself, twisted by time and silence. The door opened. A woman stepped in. Not Lillian, but someone with her voice. A nurse? A handler? She leaned down and whispered something in the boy's ear. He didn't react. She said it again, louder. Do you remember your name? No answer. Do you remember your mother? Still silence. Then she said, "You going to meet your father soon?" The boy looked up. Straight into the camera. End of video. Lucas turned pale. He doesn't even know who he is. Davis sat back. Or he knows exactly who he is. And he's pretending. I rubbed my temples. The headache building behind my eyes had been constant for days. Where is he now? Davis scanned the metadata from the file. It was recorded 4 weeks ago. GPS ping puts it somewhere in Montana. Rural area. Private land. What kind of place? I asked. Old behavioral rehab facility. Shut down 5 years ago. But someone's been using it. We flew out the next morning. Just Davis and me. Lucas wanted to come, but I told him to stay behind. If things went bad, I didn't want him anywhere near it. The drive out to the compound was long. Mountains on every side. Dirt roads. No cell service. Just pine trees and silence. The place was surrounded by fencing. Chain link rusted by time. Cameras hung from the corners, red lights blinking. Davis pulled out his binoculars. There's movement. 2 men on the east side. Armed. Security? Private. And not the friendly kind. We parked half a mile down the road and hiked through the woods. Got close enough to see the back entrance. That's when we heard it. A voice. Young. Flat. Repeating the same phrase over and over. He's coming. He's coming. He's coming. We got closer. There he was. Standing in a window, both hands pressed against the glass. Thin. Pale. Eyes locked on something we couldn't see. He's waiting for you, Davis said. Or he's warning me. We backed away. We needed a plan. A way to get in without setting off alarms. Then we heard footsteps. Fast. Heavy. Davis turned and pulled me down into the brush. A man in a black jacket ran past, shouting into a walkie-talkie. Target's awake. Repeat, target's awake. That's when we knew. They'd seen us. We ran. Shots fired behind us. Not warning shots. Real bullets. We didn't stop until we got back to the car. Peeling out, dirt flying, we didn't speak for 5 minutes. Finally, Davis said, "They've trained him." Trained him for what? He looked at me, grim. To finish what Lillian started. I stared ahead, hands gripping the wheel like a vice. I had 2 sons behind me, one broken, one rebuilt. And one ahead of me. Waiting. Somewhere in Montana. Raised in a cage, taught by ghosts. And he thought I was the enemy. We didn't go home after Montana. We went dark. Davis called in a favor with someone he used to know in the U.S. Marshals, someone who owed him big. Within 48 hours, we had new IDs, burner phones, and a cabin upstate in a place so remote the mail came once a week if you were lucky. I didn't like running. I didn't like hiding. But this wasn't about pride anymore. It was about staying alive long enough to understand what the hell Lillian had done, and what the hell she'd turned my third son into. Lucas stayed in touch through coded messages. He was still in town, laying low, watching for anything unusual. But I hadn't told him the full truth yet. About the boy in the window. About the guns. About the voices. I didn't want him to carry that weight. Not yet. Davis spent his nights tracing ownership records for that Montana compound. It had changed hands 3 times in 10 years. The last listed owner was a shell company based in the Cayman Islands. No paper trail, no names. But he found something better: utility records. Someone's been paying the power bill regularly, he said. Small drawer. Enough for lights, cameras, and refrigeration. No heat. No internet. Keeping someone alive, I said. But isolated. That matched what we saw. No comfort. Just control. I stared at the wall of maps and photographs we'd built in the cabin. Each one was like a scar. A piece of the wound that never healed. Jason, Lucas, and now this ghost son, raised like a weapon, buried in the woods, waiting. The question I couldn't answer was why. Why raise him that way? What was the endgame? That night, another letter arrived. No stamp. Just sitting on the cabin's porch like it had been placed there while we slept. Davis found it first. Brought it in, sealed in a clear plastic bag like evidence from a crime scene. It was short. Printed in bold letters. You can't fix what you left broken. You will meet him soon. But not like you hope. Below that was a photo. The third son again. Older now. Wearing a black coat. Standing in front of a boarded-up church with a cigarette in his hand. His eyes stared directly at the camera, like he knew who would receive it. My blood ran cold. Someone's moving him, Davis said. They're getting ready for something. Or he's moving himself, I said. We spent the next 2 days preparing for the worst. I checked every gun I owned. Cleaned them. Loaded them. I didn't know if I'd ever use them, but I needed to be ready. Whatever this was building toward, it was coming soon. I called Lucas. I kept my voice calm. There's something I need to tell you, I said. You have another brother. Silence on the line. I thought Jason was the only one. I thought so too. I told him everything. The boy. The compound. The photo. The letters. I need you to disappear for a while, I said. Go dark. Don't come looking. Are you planning to go after him? I don't have a choice. Lucas's voice dropped. I'm going with you. No. You not. He's my blood too. I didn't argue. I knew I'd lost that fight the moment I made the call. 3 days later, we met in a small airport hangar. Davis had chartered a private plane under an alias. We flew low, under radar, landing at a decommissioned airstrip just 20 miles from the compound. The plan was simple: approach from the north, through the tree line. Avoid cameras. Get eyes on the target. Find a way to reach him, talk to him, before whoever was holding him realized we were there. But plans only work in theory. Reality is messier. The moment we stepped onto the edge of the forest, the radio on Davis's hip crackled. An unfamiliar voice came through. Roy. We've been expecting you. We froze. The voice continued. Do you want to see your son? I looked at Davis. He nodded once. I clicked the MIC. Yes. Then come alone. North path. No weapons. If we see the others, it ends. Silence. Lucas looked ready to scream. It's a trap. Of course it is, Davis said. But I'm going anyway, I said. I took off my gear. My jacket. My holster. Everything. Just a father now. No weapons. No mask. No lies. And I walked into the woods to meet the son I never knew, not knowing if I would ever walk out. The woods swallowed me whole. Every step felt heavier than the last, like I was sinking into the earth. The trees stretched high and bare above me, casting crooked shadows across the trail. I followed the north path like the voice had instructed, unarmed and alone. The wind moved through the trees with a whisper that sounded almost human. Somewhere ahead, he was waiting. I didn't know what I expected, maybe someone who looked like me, maybe not. Maybe a boy still learning how to walk in the world. Maybe a weapon with a human face. The trail narrowed, then opened into a clearing. Dead leaves covered the ground like a forgotten rug. In the center stood a single bench, old and worn, facing an abandoned church with boarded windows and a collapsed bell tower. He was already there. Standing by the bench, hands in the pockets of a black coat, head tilted slightly like he was studying something no one else could see. His hair was dark and short, his face sharp and pale. His posture was too still. Unnaturally still. I stepped into the clearing. He didn't move. You know who I am? I asked. He nodded. I'm your father. Another nod. I walked closer. Cautiously. Watching for any flicker of reaction. But he didn't flinch. Didn't even blink. What's your name? He stared at me for a long time before speaking. His voice was low, smooth, and strangely flat. They called me Seven. Seven? Seventh project. Third child. I was the only one who completed the cycle. What cycle? He finally looked at me, and I saw it, something off in his eyes. Not anger. Not sadness. Something worse. Vacancy. They built me to survive, he said. She wanted a perfect son. One who would never betray her. One who couldn't be broken. I swallowed. My throat was dry. What did she tell you about me? That you were weak. That you abandoned us. That you had to be erased so she could start over. I sat down on the bench, more to steady myself than anything else. My legs felt like they might give out. She lied, I said. I know. His voice didn't change. Still emotionless. She lied about everything, he continued. She said Jason failed her. That Lucas was a threat. But you were the root. The one who allowed the lie to grow. I looked up at him. What do you believe? He shrugged. I believe lies are tools. They shape people. Just like truth does. And who shaped you? He didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the other side of the bench and sat down beside me. We stared at the church in silence. She's dead to me, he said. The day I found the file, the day I saw the real birth record, I stopped following her. You found it on your own? He nodded. And you sent the letters? Yes. Why? Because you needed to know, he said. You needed to see what she did. What she made. But why now? He turned his head, and for the first time, I saw something shift in his face. Regret. She's gone, he said. But the damage she caused isn't. And the people who helped her, paid for her projects, protected her, they're still out there. You mean the facility? He nodded. It wasn't just her, he said. She had backers. People who wanted me to be something else. Something worse. Are they still watching you? They were, he said. Until I disappeared. I looked at him closely. Are you still disappearing? No, he said. Now I'm watching them. Another silence. Then I asked the question I'd been carrying since Montana. What do you want from me? He didn't speak right away. When he did, his voice cracked just slightly. I want to know if I'm real. Or just a shadow of her madness. You're real, I said. You're my son. That makes you real. He turned his head away, but not before I saw the glint in his eye, moisture, not rage. The first human crack in the machine. I reached out, slowly, and placed my hand on his shoulder. He didn't pull away. We don't have to keep running, I said. You're free now. I don't feel free. Then let's start there. He nodded. I need time, he whispered. You have it. We sat in silence for a while longer. Then he stood up. I'll find you when I'm ready. He started walking toward the trees. I stood and called out, what should I call you? He paused at the edge of the clearing. Call me what she never did, he said. Then he vanished into the forest. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't felt since before this nightmare began. Hope. I didn't expect peace to come easily, but for a while, things got quiet. After that meeting in the woods, I returned to the cabin with Davis. Lucas was waiting. I told him everything, every word the third son said, every expression, every hesitation. Lucas listened in silence, his face unreadable. Then he asked, do you trust him? I thought about it. No. Not yet. But I believe him. Lucas nodded. That was enough for now. We spent the next few days lying low, monitoring everything. No more letters came. No more photos. No messages. It was like the storm had passed, but we all knew better. Storms don't end. They retreat. Davis kept digging, tracing connections from the shell company in the Caymans to something deeper. It wasn't just one facility, he found. There were others. Quiet. Hidden. All with similar blueprints, isolated compounds, minimal staff, behavioral programs masked as therapy. Places where kids like my third son were sent, shaped, tested. What was Lillian doing with them? I asked. She wasn't working alone, Davis said. She was part of something bigger. She had support, money, cover, maybe even protection from the inside. What kind of protection? The kind that makes people disappear. The kind that doesn't ask questions. It explained so much. Why the morgue covered up a body that wasn't mine. Why the police had moved so slowly. Why Jason had vanished without a trace and left no footprint. But one thing still burned in my chest. I hadn't heard from Jason. Not a single word. Not since the trial. Not since I walked out of the courtroom and left him behind. Until that night. It was raining hard. Thunder in the distance. Lucas was asleep on the couch, Davis in the other room working. I stepped out onto the porch to clear my head. And there he was. Jason. Standing in the driveway, soaked, hair plastered to his forehead, eyes sunken and tired. I didn't move. Neither did he. I waited for him to speak first. I didn't know about the third, he said finally. I said nothing. I thought I was her only project. You weren't even that, I said. He flinched, but didn't deny it. I came to say sorry, he said. For what? The affair? The betrayal? Helping her fake my death? For all of it, he said. Silence stretched between us, heavy and cold. She controlled everything, he said. From the beginning. I thought she saved me. I didn't see it until too late. And now? Now I see it. Too little, too late. I know. He stepped closer, slow, cautious, like I might vanish if he moved too fast. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he said. I just want you to know. I've been tracking the others. What others? The people who backed her. The ones who ran the programs. They are still operating. Still recruiting. She wasn't the last. Why come to me? Because you're the only one who's not afraid of them. He handed me a flash drive. Everything I've found. Names. Locations. Movements. They're planning something big. They call it with the next cycle. I don't know what it means yet, but they're not done. I looked at the drive, then back at him. And what do you want in return? He shook his head. Nothing. I just want to stop running. I hesitated, then took the drive. Stay the night, I said. We'll talk in the morning. He nodded. That night, the three of us, me, Lucas, and Jason, sat at the kitchen table in silence. No accusations. No apologies. Just presence. The way families do after too much time and too much damage. In the morning, Davis loaded the files. They were real. Raw intel. Corporate connections. Travel logs. Photos of children. Some of the names matched old contacts from Lillian's past. Others were new. Worse. Connected to places we thought were shut down. And one name stood out. A man named Grant Holloway. Head of a biotech firm. Publicly clean. Privately corrupt. He'd met with Lillian 5 times in the years before her death. He donated millions to child psychology programs. He had connections with law enforcement and private security groups. Davis looked at me. He's the spider in the center of the web. Then here's where we start, I said. Jason nodded. He's dangerous. So are we, I said. We made a plan. We'd expose them. Not with guns. Not with revenge. With truth. The way Lillian could never fight against. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't be easy. People like Holloway don't go down quietly. And this time, we weren't just fighting for ourselves. We were fighting for everyone who'd ever been broken and buried. For the sons. For the forgotten. For the ones who weren't supposed to survive. The next 3 days were consumed by planning. We mapped out everything we had on Grant Holloway, his public life, his private dealings, his associates. He was polished, clean, admired by the media. His company, Holloway Solutions, was supposedly focused on behavioral wellness through technology. They ran ads showing children smiling in therapy rooms, smiling parents, sterile labs with friendly staff in white coats. It was a lie. Behind the facade, Davis uncovered contracts, non-disclosure agreements, sealed settlements with families who claimed abuse, internal reports mentioning subjects, not patients. It was Lillian's world, just more refined, more corporate. She was just a piece of something much larger. Holloway had picked up where she left off. He's not hiding, Davis said. He thinks he's untouchable. That made him dangerous. We agreed on a strategy: gather hard evidence, deliver it to the right hands, and if that failed, expose him to the world. No more secrets. No more whispers. This time, the truth would burn like daylight. Jason used his connections to trace Holloway's movements. Lucas helped with tech, pulling satellite images, hacking into Holloway's travel logs. I watched, learned, waited. We were four men tied together by a single woman's lies, and now we were bound by a single goal. Justice. Not for me. For everyone. Holloway's next stop was a private conference in upstate New York. Invite only. High security. Not the kind of place you walk into without a plan. We didn't plan to walk in. We planned to sneak in. The venue was a glass and steel hotel surrounded by woodland and a gated perimeter. The conference was branded as a Neurobehavioral Innovation Summit. Code for rich men playing God with people's minds. Davis forged IDs. Jason got us passes. Lucas tapped into the venue's camera network. We entered as tech support, three nameless workers in blue polos with clipboards and tool belts. I wore a hat low over my eyes and carried a briefcase filled not with wires but with truth. Inside, it was polished marble, dim lighting, soft jazz playing in the background. Men and women in tailored suits talked in hushed tones about data optimization, subconscious suggestion, and compliance testing. They weren't hiding. They were celebrating. Holloway was scheduled to speak at noon. We had 2 hours to find what we came for. Jason distracted the security chief. Lucas tapped the server room. Davis and I slipped into Holloway's private suite with a keycard Jason had cloned. It was cleaner than I expected. A laptop sat on the desk. Locked. I handed it to Davis. Get what you can. He connected his own drive, fingers dancing across the keyboard. Meanwhile, I checked the drawers. In the bottom one, beneath a fake lining, I found a black notebook. Handwritten. Real ink. I opened it and my blood froze. Case studies. Each one numbered. Dates. Locations. Behaviors. Corrections. One page stood out. Project 7. That was him. My third son. He was listed not by name, but by performance metrics. Compliance scores. Resistance levels. Emotional response triggers. There were notes in the margin: improving. Responds best to paternal absence. Rage spikes under maternal stimuli. Useful in conflict simulations. I kept reading. Then I found another entry. Project 9. Age 6. Location, undisclosed. Second stage development underway. Introduced to synthetic trauma. Shows early signs of detachment. Will replace Project 7 in 2 years. I snapped the notebook shut. They are still making them. Davis looked up. I've got the files. We moved quickly. Out the door, back through the hallway, through the server stairs. No alarms. No eyes on us. Until we reached the parking lot. 2 men in black suits stepped out of a van, eyes locked on us. You not stuff, one said. Davis tossed the laptop bag to me. Go. Now. He charged the men without hesitation, giving me just enough time to run. I didn't look back. I made it to the car. Lucas was already inside, watching the cameras. What happened? They saw us, I said. Davis is covering us. He didn't ask questions. Just drove. Jason met us at the safe house later. His lip was split. Blood on his shirt. I had to knock the head of security out to get away, he said. But it worked. Davis showed up 2 hours later. Limping. Bruised. Grinning. We got it all, he said. Names. Experiments. Funding sources. Everything. We backed up the files. Sent copies to 3 different journalists, 2 senators, and a trusted nonprofit that specialized in whistleblower cases. But we knew that wouldn't be enough. People like Holloway survive headlines. They survive lawsuits. To stop him, we needed to finish what Lillian started, then burn the entire system she served to the ground. Because now we knew the truth. There wasn't just a Project 7. There was a Project 9. And somewhere, another child was waiting in the dark. The footage was worse than I imagined. We watched it in silence, crowded around Davis's laptop in the safe house. The files were labeled coldly: Behavioral Test A7, Compliance Session 12, Emotional Response, A Parental Simulation. Just titles, no names. No humanity. The first video showed a small, windowless room. A child, no older than 6, sat cross-legged on a mat, staring at a blank wall. A voice, calm, female, spoke through a speaker in the ceiling. "Do you know where you are?" The boy didn't answer. "Do you remember what we talked about yesterday?" Still silence. Then the door opened. A man entered, dressed in all black, wearing a smile that didn't touch his eyes. He knelt beside the boy, pulled out a tablet, and began showing him images, photos of families, animals, playgrounds. The boy didn't react. Until the last image. A woman. She looked vaguely like Lillian. Or maybe I just saw what I feared. The boy's face changed. His jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed. He didn't speak, but his hand curled into a fist. "That's the trigger," Davis said softly. Jason S. The video ended. We all sat in silence for a moment. "Project 9, I said. Lucas exhaled. "How many more?" "There could be dozens," Jason said. "But 9 is active. He's their future." We'd sent the first wave of files to every contact we had. A few journalists reached out, asking for verification. Some of them were scared. Others were intrigued. A senator's aide requested a private meeting. We agreed, but on our terms: secure location, recorded session, full disclosure. Still, I knew exposure alone wouldn't stop this. This wasn't just corruption. This was cultivation. They were building people. Weaponizing children. Shaping minds like clay, breaking them and remolding them until they fit a purpose no one dared say out loud. Control. Order. Obedience. I didn't care about the politics. I didn't care who funded it. All I cared about now was the child in that video. The one they called 9. The one who didn't know who he was yet. But would soon. That night, I dreamed of a house on fire. Not mine. Lillian's. But it wasn't burning from the outside. It was burning from within. Every window glowed, every door cracked with smoke, and inside I saw shadows, children, faces against the glass, watching me silently as the flames licked their feet. I woke up in a cold sweat. Lucas was already up. He sat at the table with a cup of coffee, staring at a printed screenshot from the video. "He looks like you," he said quietly. I nodded. "And her?" "Yeah." We didn't speak for a while. Then he asked, "What are you going to do if we find him?" The truth sat heavy in my chest. I don't know. Because the boy in that video wasn't just a victim. He was becoming something else. Something they'd been sculpting for years. What do you say to a child who's been raised in a cage of silence and control? How do you tell him the world outside isn't the enemy? Later that day, Davis got a ping. A satellite image from one of the remote compounds tied to Holloway's accounts. This one was in northern Idaho. Isolated. Surrounded by forest. and it had power activity consistent with the other facilities. We cross-referenced supply orders, medical shipments, courier visits. Everything pointed to something still happening inside. "That's where he is," Davis said. "Then we go," I said. "No press," Jason added. "No senators. Not this time." This time, it was personal. We flew out under aliases, landed in a small charter airport, then drove 4 hours into the woods. The compound was fenced. Cameras on the corners. A single guard at the front gate, dressed in the same uniform we'd seen in Montana. We scoped it out for 2 days. No staff rotations. No visitors. Just silence. Until night 3. At 2:13 a.m., a single light turned on in the west wing of the compound. We moved. Silently. Precisely. Davis disabled the perimeter sensors. Jason cut the fence. Lucas kept watch from the ridge with a thermal scope. I moved through the brush like I had when I was younger, quieter, slower, more focused. We entered through the back, using a maintenance hatch Davis had mapped out. The hallway was dim. No alarms. No cameras in this section. Just silence and fluorescent hum. We found the room in the west wing. Numbered C9. I stood in front of the door, heart pounding. Then I opened it. He was there. Sitting on the edge of a bed, just like the footage. He looked up. Our eyes met. For a second, the world stopped. He didn't speak. Neither did I. Because I saw it instantly. Not rage. Not confusion. Recognition. And then he whispered a word I wasn't prepared for. Dad. I didn't move. The word echoed in my head, bouncing against memories I didn't have and a future I hadn't prepared for. Dad. His voice cracked when he said it, like it was a word he wasn't sure he was allowed to say. It wasn't a question. It wasn't hesitant. It was certain. And that certainty terrified me. How do you know me? I asked softly. He stood up, slowly, as if the act of rising had to be earned. He was taller than I expected. Thin, but not frail. Alert. His eyes never left mine. They showed me your picture. Over and over. Told me you were the reason I was here. I nodded slowly, trying to keep my breathing calm. What else did they tell you? That I was different, he said. Stronger. More controlled. That I was made for something special. Do you believe that? He hesitated. I used to. I stepped further into the room. Jason and Davis were at the door behind me. Lucas stayed outside, watching the hallway. What do you believe now? He looked at me for a long time. I believe I was lied to. I let out a slow breath. What's your name? He blinked. They didn't give me one. I nodded. Would you like one? He didn't answer right away. Then he said, what would you call me? I thought about it. Not as a symbol. Not as a code. As a father. As someone who'd been lied to too many times and wasn't about to lie again. Michael, I said. That's the name I would have given you. He repeated it. Michael. Then something shifted. His shoulders relaxed. His jaw unclenched. And his eyes, those sharp, trained eyes, softened just a little. I walked to him slowly, cautiously. I don't want to take you, I said. I want you to come with us. On your own terms. He looked toward the door. There are others here. How many? I don't know. I hear them sometimes. Through the walls. crying, talking to themselves. Davis stepped forward. We can't get them all out now. I'm not leaving without them, Michael said. And I saw it, right there in that moment. Whatever they tried to erase in him, they'd failed completely. Compassion. He had it. Jason nodded. We'll split up. Take the West Wing. You and Lucas sweep the North. I turned to Michael. Do you know where the exit tunnels are? He nodded. Behind the med bay. They use them for supply runs. Lead us. Michael didn't hesitate. He walked down that hallway like he'd been doing it his entire life. Except this time, he wasn't following orders. He was leading us out. Room by room, we found them. 6 children. 3 boys, 3 girls. Different ages. Different stages. Some stared blankly. Some whispered. One girl cried when Michael touched her shoulder and told her, "It's over." We moved fast. Quiet. The emergency exit tunnel was locked with a key code. Michael entered it without pause. He had memorized everything. The tunnel was cold and narrow, the walls lined with old supply crates and broken pallets. It opened out into a forested ravine behind the facility. We kept moving. 2 miles through the woods to the van Davis had hidden earlier. No lights. No noise. Only breathing. Only footsteps. We didn't speak until we were 10 miles away. Then one of the boys whispered, "Are we safe?" Michael looked at me. I answered for both of us. Yes. You're safe now. We brought them to a shelter in a different state. One of Davis's contacts, a retired therapist who specialized in deprogramming trauma victims, took them in without question. No questions. No records. Just healing. Michael stayed with me. We didn't talk much the first few days. But every night, he asked me to tell him one thing. Not about the programs. Not about the pain. About life. Tell me about your favorite food. Tell me about when you were a kid. Tell me about when you fell in love. Each story, he listened to like it was sacred. Because no one had ever told him stories just to make him feel human. And for the first time since Lillian's empire collapsed, I felt something I didn't expect. Gratitude. Not because we won. Because he survived. Because he chose to be more than what they made him. Because he called me Dad, without hate. And meant it. Michael didn't sleep the first week. He tried. He'd lie on the couch in the guest room, eyes closed, breathing even, but I knew he was awake. Every morning, he was already sitting at the kitchen table before sunrise, silent, alert, scanning the windows. It wasn't fear. It was habit. After years in a controlled facility, his body didn't understand rest. It had been trained for readiness, not peace. I didn't push him. I didn't try to force the rhythm of a normal life. Instead, I offered him pieces of it, quiet mornings, coffee brewing, the sound of birds outside, books left on the table. The first time I saw him read, I almost cried. It was a paperback I'd left open on the kitchen counter. Nothing special. A crime novel I'd read a dozen times. But when I came back an hour later, he was sitting in the chair, halfway through chapter 4. He looked up, held the book like it was fragile. "Does this really happen?" he asked. "What? People solving things with nothing but thinking?" I smiled. "Sometimes." He kept reading. Every day, a little more light came back into him. Lucas came by often. They didn't talk much at first, but I saw the bond forming, shared silence, nods, quiet trust. Jason stayed away for a while. I understood why. He wasn't ready to face the reflection. Michael was the version of himself he couldn't handle, the one shaped by control without the illusion of love. But eventually, they had to meet. It happened on a rainy Tuesday. Michael was slicing apples at the counter. Jason walked in without warning, wet from the downpour, tension hanging off him like a second coat. Michael turned around slowly. They stared at each other for what felt like hours. Then Jason said, "I'm sorry." Michael didn't answer. Jason stepped closer. "I should have come to get you. I should have known she." "You believed her," Michael said. "That's worse." Jason nodded. And for a moment, I thought the room might break apart from the weight of it. But then Michael surprised me. He set the knife down, picked up one of the sliced apples, and handed it to Jason. "Do better." That was all. And somehow, it was enough. Later that night, the four of us sat around the table. Lucas was drawing. Jason was flipping through one of Davis's files. Michael was reading again. And I just watched. Because I'd never imagined this. A family. Not perfect. Not traditional. But real. Still, we weren't done. Holloway had gone underground. After the files leaked and the children were rescued, he disappeared from public view. No statements. No arrests. His company shifted ownership. The websites went dark. Investors fled. But he was still out there. And we couldn't leave that door open. Davis returned a few days later with an update. We traced a private jet to Argentina. Landed on a private strip owned by one of Holloway's shell companies. "So he's running," I said. "No," Davis said. "He's regrouping." We all looked at him. "He's setting up again. Somewhere new." We found purchase records for medical equipment, security systems, custom transport vans. Same blueprint. I felt the fire rise in my chest again. Jason stood. "Then we go." "No," Michael said. Everyone turned to him. "I'll go." I started to protest, but he raised a hand. "I know how he thinks. What he'll protect. What he'll hide. I can get close where none of you can. He'll recognize you," I said. "I'm counting on it." There was silence. Then I said, "Not alone." Michael nodded. "No. Not alone." Lucas and Jason both stepped forward. Davis rolled out the map. "Then let's finish this." We spent the next week preparing. New documents. New identities. We studied the terrain, the layout, the expected guard shifts. It was like preparing for war, because in a way, it was. But this time, we weren't going in to rescue. We were going in to end it. Michael didn't say much during the planning. But the night before we left, he knocked on my door. "I don't know what happens after this," he said. "Neither do I," I replied. He hesitated. Then he stepped forward and hugged me. Not awkwardly. Not stiffly. A real embrace. Tight. Real. Human. "You gave me a name," he whispered. I held him tight. "You gave it meaning." The next morning, we left. Not as victims. Not as survivors. But as men determined to burn the last shadow of Lillian's world to the ground. The air in Argentina smelled like ash and citrus. We landed under fake names, using passports Davis had arranged through one of his oldest contacts, an ex-Interpol agent who owed him favors. From the moment we touched down, every step was calculated. We couldn't afford to be seen. Not by local authorities. Not by Holloway's people. Michael, Jason, Lucas, and I moved as a unit. Tight, efficient, silent. We stayed in a safe house 2 miles from the new facility, a modern concrete compound buried in the jungle, shielded by foliage and protected by heat sensors. It wasn't on any official map. No road signs. No government permits. But the supply trucks came twice a week. And we tracked every one of them. Inside that compound, Holloway was rebuilding. Not just equipment. Not just staff. Programs. We intercepted internal emails, coded, fragmented. But the message was clear. A new cycle was being prepared. This one wasn't about children. It was about adults. Prisoners. Runaways. Lost souls who wouldn't be missed. He was expanding the model. No more subtle compliance techniques. No more long-term shaping. This time, it was rapid reprogramming. Full neurological wipes followed by synthetic imprinting. A factory for obedience. It made me sick. We watched the compound for 4 days before we made our move. Michael insisted on going in first. "No one knows I'm alive," he said. "They think I died in the Montana breach. That's our advantage." "You sure about this?" I asked him. He nodded. "This ends with me." "No," I said. "It ends with all of us." But I let him go. We gave him a comms unit and backup extraction plan. Jason and Lucas covered the perimeter while Davis and I monitored the cameras he managed to access from inside. The feeds were brutal, rooms filled with restrained bodies, eyes vacant, brains hooked to glowing headsets pulsing with light. It was worse than anything Lillian had done. Holloway wasn't hiding monsters. He was building them. Michael moved like a ghost through the hallways, avoiding cameras, mimicking protocols he'd learned during his own time in captivity. No one looked twice. They didn't recognize him without the trauma-worn face he'd once carried. Then he reached the lower level. Room marked Initiates. That's where we found them. 12 people strapped to upright metal chairs, motionless, their heads enclosed in steel visors humming with electricity. A technician monitored vitals. 2 armed guards paced the corridor. Michael spoke into the MIC. "I can overload the system. Shut it down. But it'll trip alarms." "How long will you need?" Davis asked. 30 seconds. "You'll have 20, Jason cut in. "We'll hit the gate hard, draw fire." I grabbed my pack. "We go loud." Lucas smiled for the first time in days. Finally. We moved. Jason took the front with 2 EMP grenades strapped to his belt. Lucas jammed external signals to delay reinforcements. I followed Michael's map and breached from the north service tunnel. The first explosion rocked the jungle. Guards scrambled toward the front. That gave me just enough time to slip inside, sprinting toward the lower level. Michael was already at the server core, wires exposed, tools scattered. 15 seconds, he said. Gunfire echoed through the halls above us. I could hear Lucas yelling commands. Jason's rifle cracking. The system's lights began flashing red. 10 seconds. I held the door. A guard turned the corner, too fast, too eager. I disarmed him with a strike to the arm, then knocked him unconscious. 3 seconds. Pull them out, I shouted. Michael hit the last sequence. The visors lifted. 12 people gasped for air like they'd been underwater for hours. I moved fast, helping them out of the restraints. Michael turned to me. We have to torch it. Everything. Burn the data. The prototypes. All of it. I brought what we need. We placed charges along the lower wing, set to a remote detonator. The rest of the team regrouped at extraction. Jason was bleeding from his shoulder. Lucas had a cracked rib. Davis limped. But we were alive. And so were they. We moved the rescued test subjects to the jungle edge, where a van waited. Davis drove. We didn't stop for hours. At dawn, we crossed the border. 3 days later, the facility exploded. We watched the video from a drone feed. Flames shot into the sky. Walls collapsed. Files incinerated. Power lines snapped. And just like that, it was over. Or so we thought. Until Davis opened a new email, unmarked, anonymous, no subject. Inside was a single sentence. You may have stopped one site. But the system is global. And below it, a list of coordinates. 8 countries. 9 facilities. And one final message. You were never the end. You are the beginning. We sat in silence for a long time after reading the email. No one said it out loud, but we all felt it, that cold realization sinking in like a slow poison. We hadn't destroyed the monster. We'd just cut off one of its arms. And now it knew our names. Our faces. Our method. The global system they hinted at? It wasn't new. It had been growing for decades. Lillian wasn't the source, she was a disciple. Holloway wasn't the top, he was middle management. And we'd just announced ourselves to the entire chain above him. Davis leaned back in his chair, eyes locked on the screen. 8 countries. 9 facilities. If even half of those are real, we are looking at something too big for any one of us to handle. Lucas stared out the window, jaw tight. We should have known. You don't build something like this for one location. You don't spend billions to control a dozen people. Jason poured himself a glass of water with hands that barely stopped shaking. They called it the beginning. That means they were always planning for someone like us. Michael said nothing. He sat alone, away from the rest of us, head down, hands folded. His mind was somewhere else. Maybe remembering his time in the first facility. Maybe imagining the ones we hadn't seen yet. I finally broke the silence. If we stop now, everything we did means nothing. Davis looked at me. You're not responsible for this entire network, Roy. You did what no one else could. Then we keep going, I said. Until someone stops us, or we stop them. Michael raised his head. His voice was calm, measured. Then we need a plan. And just like that, the next chapter of the war began. We divided the list into regions. Davis would go to Europe, London, Berlin, Prague. Jason would take South America. Lucas volunteered for Asia, fluent in enough languages to stay hidden. I would stay with Michael. Because the last site, number 9, was in the United States. Hidden beneath a military subcontractor's old warehouse in Nevada. It had been shut down officially 10 years ago. But Davis found signs of power draw, encrypted data traffic, and cargo shipments with no declared origin. We knew what that meant. It was active. Michael and I went in quietly. No team this time. No tech support. Just us. We drove across the country in an unmarked pickup, rotating motels every night, using burner phones for communication. No electronics inside the truck. Just maps, notebooks, and cash. I could tell Michael was changing. The stiffness in his movements was fading. His voice didn't sound as programmed. He started asking questions I didn't expect. What was my mom like? Before all this? Who taught you to shoot? Why did you stay loyal when she betrayed you? Some of the questions I answered. Others, I didn't have the courage to touch yet. We arrived in Nevada under the cover of a desert storm. The warehouse was camouflaged, just like the others. No signage. Just a chain-link fence, satellite dishes, and a few armed guards that rotated every 6 hours. Michael scoped the site for 2 days. He memorized everything: routes, habits, thermal signatures. Then he came back with a strange look in his eyes. "I've seen this place before," he said. "You mean in the files?" "No," he said. "In dreams." It stopped me cold. "What kind of dreams?" "Flashes. Rooms. Faces. But one keeps repeating. A room with mirrors. No ceiling. Just light. And a voice saying, 'We made you for the reset.'" I felt the chill crawl up my spine. "Do you think it's real?" He nodded. "I think I was here before. A long time ago." That meant one thing. This site wasn't just active. It was personal. We planned the entry for midnight. Storm clouds returned, masking us. We cut the power on the west end and entered through a ventilation duct Michael remembered from his dream. Every hallway felt familiar to him. Every corner brought something back, a memory, a fragment, a sound. Then we reached the chamber. Just like he described. Mirrors. Light. And in the center, a chair, identical to the one we'd pulled him out of in Montana. This was a cloning site. Not of bodies. Of behavior. There were terminals along the walls, each one showing brain scans. Overlaid emotions. Predictive patterns. Each labeled not by names, but by profiles. "They've been creating behavioral templates," Michael whispered. "Not people. Programs. Personalities." "Why?" "To upload them," he said. "Into anyone they choose." I backed away from the terminal, feeling sick. Then the door behind us opened. And there he stood. Not Holloway. Someone older. Calm. Tall. Pale suit. The voice from Michael's dream. "I've been waiting for you," he said. "Both of you." Michael stepped in front of me. But I didn't move. Because something about the man's face made my heart stop. He looked just like me. Only older. Cleaner. And smiling. I didn't speak. Couldn't. The man standing in front of me wore my face, but it wasn't just resemblance, it was precision. Same jawline. Same brow. Same scar above the right eyebrow, a scar I'd gotten falling off a bike when I was 11. He stepped forward, slow and confident, hands behind his back like a politician or a priest. Michael tensed beside me. "Who are you?" The man smiled. "I'm the final result." I forced my voice to work. "That's not possible." "Oh, but it is," he said. "You're looking at what happens when you take years of data, emotion, memory, and combine it with biological correction. I'm what they intended you to be." "You're a clone," I said, barely able to believe my own words. "No," he replied. "I'm a refinement." Michael stepped forward. "You were part of the program?" "I was the endgame," he said. "Everything they learned from you, from your children, from Lillian, it all fed into me." I stared at him. "So why now? Why show yourself?" "Because you came too close. You destroyed a piece of the structure. And now, you deserve to understand what's been done in your name." "In my name?" I echoed. He turned to the wall of screens, tapped a button. Dozens of images appeared, scenes from my life. My house. My truck. My time in the military. Lillian. Jason as a baby. Lucas as a toddler. Michael in the chair. "You were the seed," he said. "Everything started with you. Your personality was the first to be mapped, recorded, spliced. They built every version of you based on a core profile Lillian helped construct. My blood ran cold. You saying, everything? Every son, he said, was based on fragments of you. Modified. Adjusted. Controlled. Michael turned to me, eyes wide. Even me? Yes, the man said calmly. You, his anger. His fear. His resilience. Lucas was his intuition. Jason was his loyalty. You not just brothers. You iterations. I felt the room spinning. No. That's not true. They are real. They made their own choices. Exactly, the man said. That's the one thing we couldn't predict. Free will. He turned back toward me, expression softening. That's why we need you now. You've gone farther than anyone expected. You united the iterations. You dismantled a facility. You triggered global exposure. I stepped back. What do you want? To merge, he said simply. Not with you. With your legacy. With your image. We want the world to believe you leading the new version of the program. Publicly. Voluntarily. Michael laughed. Cold. Bitter. You want him to become your spokesperson? Not a spokesperson, the man corrected. A symbol. A bridge between fear and obedience. If people see a man like him endorsing what we do, they'll trust us. And if we refuse? I asked. The man's smile faded. Then we erase you and launch anyway. With someone else wearing your face. Michael stepped between us. Try it. The man studied him. You're more stable than I expected, he said. They said you wouldn't survive outside the system. Michael narrowed his eyes. They were wrong. Then the lights cut. Emergency red washed over the room. Davis's voice crackled through the earpiece. Roy, we found the uplink node. We're torching the servers in 60 seconds. The clone turned to the terminal, fingers moving fast. I won't let you destroy everything we built. I pulled Michael back. We are leaving. He hesitated. Then nodded. We ran. Down the corridor, through the maintenance tunnel. Explosions rocked the foundation. Lights flickered. Dust fell from the ceiling. Alarms wailed behind us. Voices shouted in Spanish. Commands. Confusion. We emerged into the desert night. Jason and Lucas were already at the truck, waiting with Davis. Did you get it? Jason asked. I nodded. He's real. And he's me. We drove hard through the night. As the sun rose, we crossed the state line. Behind us, the Nevada site went dark. Servers melted. Blueprints vanished. And the man who wore my face disappeared into smoke. But it wasn't over. It was never going to be over. Not until every last version of this system was buried. Michael sat beside me, quiet, thoughtful. Then he said, he was wrong, you know. About what? We're not just your fragments. We are not versions. We are people. I reached over and gripped his shoulder. You're my son. That's all that matters. He nodded. Then said something that made me realize just how far he'd come. We have work to do. We didn't go home after Nevada. There was no home to return to, at least not the one we knew before all this started. Lillian's shadow stretched too far. Holloway's system ran too deep. And the face of the man I met in that underground chamber haunted every corner of my mind. So instead of retreating, we moved forward. For the next 6 months, we hunted them. Not with violence. Not with vengeance. With exposure. Davis built a secure server in a bunker outside the Dakotas, off-grid, solar-powered, inaccessible without biometric keys. From there, we dumped everything we had: videos, documents, photos, brain scans, medical records, transport logs. A digital library of horrors. We gave access to journalists, to whistleblower agencies, to rogue prosecutors with nothing left to lose. And slowly, the tide began to turn. Articles surfaced. Government panels launched. People who thought they were safe started sweating under the lights of public scrutiny. But the system didn't collapse. It shifted. It adapted. Like a snake shedding its skin. Jason and Lucas followed the money trails: banks in Zurich, shell companies in Singapore. They discovered funding channels feeding other black site programs. Not in the US anymore. But in countries with no oversight. Places where people vanish and no one asks why. Michael and I handled the human side. We tracked survivors. Visited shelters. Sat with the broken, the rescued, the discarded. Every time he held the hand of someone who once lived in a chair like his, I saw the pain in his eyes. But I also saw strength. Purpose. He wasn't a weapon anymore. He was a protector. Then one day, a letter arrived. Unmarked. No return address. Inside was a single line of handwriting. The final reset is scheduled. Below it, a date. 3 weeks away. And a location: Oslo, Norway. We moved immediately. It was a summit, private, of course, branded as a global technology forum. But the attendees weren't tech visionaries. They were architects of compliance. People who saw the human brain as software to rewrite. We didn't go there to destroy anything. We went there to tell the truth. Michael was the one who stood on stage. He hacked their system, rerouted the live feed, and replaced the keynote speaker with himself. No mask. No edits. Just him. And he told them everything. His origin. His captivity. The programs. The control. The escape. And then he said the words that will stay with me forever. I'm not a ghost. I'm not a file. I'm not a number. I'm a man. And I remember everything. They tried to cut the feed. They failed. The world saw him. The world heard. For a few days, it felt like victory. Then came the counter-narrative. Government officials called him unstable. News outlets tried to discredit our files. Anonymous sources called it a hoax. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. The illusion was broken. You can't put a monster back in the shadows once people know it exists. A year passed. We moved less. Talked more. Jason returned to teaching. Lucas started a foundation to help trauma victims. Davis disappeared into the wilderness, saying he'd done enough. I didn't argue. And Michael? Michael stayed with me. He worked on cars. Read every book in the house. Laughed sometimes. Real, not forced. One evening, he came out to the porch with a notebook. I've been writing things down, he said. My memories. My story. For yourself? For whoever comes next. He handed me the notebook. On the first page, in shaky handwriting, it said, "This is what they tried to erase." I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just held it. Because this was more than survival. It was legacy. It was proof that they didn't win. And never would. As the sun dipped below the hills, Michael looked out at the horizon. "What now?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. Because I finally understood something. The war wasn't over. But for us, it was time to live. "We keep telling the truth," I said. "We keep building something better." He nodded. Then he smiled. And for the first time since I met my son, the one they tried to bury under wires and silence, I saw him not as a survivor, but as a man standing tall in the world they swore he'd never see. Free. And finally, whole.